Welcome to Tell Me More Stories Told as podcast. Today, get ready. We're taking you on a journey back in time.
A journey to a single moment, really, that just exploded across the globe.
Absolutely. An event that didn't just cause ripples, it fundamentally redrew the map, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand.
And we're not talking about a dry history lesson here. This is a genuinely thrilling story. A tragedy, of course,
Right.
but packed with intrigue.
Exactly. We're going to unravel it. All the people involved, their, hidden motives, the conspiracies swirling around.
The near misses. There were so many points where things could have gone differently.
Right. And those absolutely fateful moments that just changed everything. Our mission today is to unpack it, sort of separate the key threads.
And really get why this assassination, this one event in Sarajevo, had such monumental consequences. You'll find some surprising connections, I think.
Okay, so let's dive in. Who are the central figures here?
Well, first, you have Archduke Franz Ferdinand himself and his wife, Sophie, who was the Duchess of Hohenberg. And crucially, he was the heir, the next in line for the Austro-Hungarian throne.
And the setting.
Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina. The date is June 28th, 1914.
Now, context is key here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Austria-Hungary had annexed Bosnia just a few years before, 1908.
Yes, and that was a huge point of contention. It really fueled nationalist tensions, especially among Bosnian Serbs who wanted to be part of Serbia, not Austria-Hungary.
So the assassination, it wasn't just about killing the Archduke.
No. The political goal was much bigger. It was an attempt to break Bosnia and Herzegovina away from Austria-Hungary.
To create what they called a South Slav state, a kind of Yugoslavia.
Precisely. That was the dream for these nationalists.
And the assassin himself.
Gavrilo Princip. He was a young Bosnian Serb student, but, and this is important, he wasn't a lone wolf, not at all.
Okay.
He was part of a group, 6 conspirators in total, coordinated by a man named Danilo Ilic.
Do we know the others?
We do. There was Mohamed Mehmed Basic, Faso Uberlovic, Nedeljko Abrunovic, Vjetko Popovic, and Trifko Grabic.
And almost all Bosnian Serbs.
Well, except Mehmed Basic, yes. And they were members of this student revolutionary group that became known as Young Bosnia, very driven by nationalist ideas.
But it goes deeper than just students, doesn't it? There were shadowy organizations involved.
Oh, absolutely. This is where the Black Hand comes in, a Serbian secret nationalist group.
The Black Hand. Sounds ominous.
It was. And key figures from Serbian military intelligence were involved in supporting this assassination team. People like Dragutin Dmitrijevic, known as Asipis, who was actually the chief of Serbian military intelligence.
The chief of intelligence,
Yeah.
wow.
Yes. And Major Vojislav Tenkosic, plus an intelligence agent named Red Malababic. They were all in the mix.
How were they involved? What did they do?
Well, Tenkosic, for instance, he provided the actual weapons, bombs and pistols.
He just handed them over.
Handed them over and arranged training for the assassins in Belgrade. And Malababic, he had this clandestine network, secret routes that they used to smuggle the assassins and the weapons across the border.
So this is like state-sponsored or at least state-facilitated terrorism.
The lines get very blurry. It wasn't a sudden thing either. These tensions, they'd been simmering for decades. You have to look back at the 1878 Treaty of Berlin.
Right, that gave Austria-Hungary administration over Bosnia.
Exactly. Then there's the rise of Serbian nationalism, especially after a really brutal coup in Serbia in 1903. Economic conflicts like the Pig War, the Bosnian crisis when the annexation happened, the Balkan Wars.
It all just kept adding fuel to the fire.
Constantly. Fueling this desire, this dream of a greater Serbia, both in Serbia itself and among Serbs living under Austro-Hungarian rule in Bosnia.
And this led to specific groups forming.
Yes, groups like Narodna Odbrana, which means national defense, and Young Bosnia. Their aim was unification, getting rid of Austro-Hungarian influence.
Were there earlier attempts on officials?
There were. Unsuccessful ones, but they happened. Like Bogdan Iradzic's attempt back in 1910. He failed, killed himself, but he actually became a kind of martyr figure.
An inspiration for Princip.
Princip himself said so. Iradzic's grave was apparently a place Princip visited. It shows the mindset.
And the Black Hand formed around this time too.
1911, more radical, explicitly dedicated to creating this greater Serbia through, and they used the term terrorist action. They had links, sort of underground links, to Narodna Odbrana and Young Bosnia. It was a network.
Okay, so why was Franz Ferdinand actually in Bosnia in June 1914? What was the official reason?
He was there primarily to observe military maneuvers, but he and Sophie were also scheduled to officially open the new state museum in Sarajevo.
And Sophie being there, that was significant too, wasn't it? because of their marriage.
Yes, absolutely. Their marriage was morganatic, meaning Sophie wasn't from a reigning royal family, so their children couldn't inherit the throne.
Yeah.
It caused a lot of friction at the Austro-Hungarian court.
So she wasn't usually treated as his equal.
Not in most official settings, but there was a loophole. When Franz Ferdinand was acting in his military capacity as Inspector General of the Army, which he was doing in Bosnia, then protocol allowed Sophie to appear alongside him with the honors befitting his rank. So this visit was actually a rare chance for them to be seen together properly in public.
And the date, June 28th, just horribly poignant timing.
Incredibly poignant. It was their 14th wedding anniversary.
Oh, wow. That just adds another layer of tragedy. Now, Franz Ferdinand himself, what is politics like? Was he seen as this hardline enemy by all Serbs?
That's a really interesting and crucial point. Not necessarily. He actually favored more rights for the Slavic peoples within the empire. He was associated with ideas of federalism, even something called trialism.
Trialism, what's that?
The idea was to reorganize the dual Austro-Hungarian monarchy into a triple monarchy, German, Magyar, and Slavic, giving the Slavs, including those in Bosnia, much more autonomy.
So, this sounds like something some nationalists might actually want.
You'd think so, but for the most extreme Serb nationalists, the ones who wanted complete independence and union with Serbia, these reforms were actually a threat.
How so?
Because if the Slavs gained more rights within the empire, it might weaken the argument for breaking away entirely. It could make Austro-Hungarian rule more acceptable.
So his potential reforms made him a target.
Ironically, yes. Princip later said preventing those reforms was one of his motivations. He saw Ferdinand as an obstacle to the ultimate goal of a greater Serbia.
And the date again, June 28th, it wasn't just their anniversary.
No. In Serbia, June 28th is Vidovdan, a hugely important national holiday.
Commemorating.
The Battle of Kosovo in 1389, a pivotal, almost mythical event in Serbian history where they fought the Ottoman Empire. And legend has it, a Serbian knight assassinated the Ottoman Sultan during that battle.
So the symbolism
Was incredibly powerful for Princip and the others. Resistance against foreign rule, martyrdom, even assassination as a patriotic act. They saw themselves in that historical narrative. It's chilling, really.
It paints this picture of a city just simmering, loaded with history, tension. Okay, so how did the actual plot come together? Who pulled the strings?
Danilo Ilic, he's the key organizer in Sarajevo. He had ties to a revolutionary group modeled on the Black Hand.
And he connects to the Serbian intelligence chief, Apis.
It's believed Ilic met with Apis, yes, to propose direct action against someone high profile in Austria-Hungary. Apis and his circle pretty much controlled the Black Hand by this point.
And initially, it wasn't Franz Ferdinand they were aiming for.
Apparently not. The earlier plan was to go after Oskar Podgorek, the governor of Bosnia.
Why the switch?
Franz Ferdinand was just a much bigger target. Killing the heir to the throne would send a far more dramatic message, wouldn't it? Much more impact.
Makes sense. So Ilic starts recruiting the team.
He does. He coordinates the guys who came from Belgrade Princip, Arbrinovic, Grabej, with the local recruits he found in Sarajevo, Ubrilovic, Popovic, and Mehmed Basic.
And the weapons came through that Black Hand connection in Serbia.
Exactly. Major Tankosic arranged it, using Milan Ciganovic as an intermediary. They got grenades, pistols, ammo, even some money.
And cyanide pills.
Cyanide pills, yes, for suicide if caught. They got some basic weapons training in a park in Belgrade, a map of Sarajevo, and crucially, help crossing the border secretly.
It sounds less like a student plot and more like a covert op.
The lines are very, very blurred. Getting from Belgrade to Sarajevo was this whole clandestine affair. Serbian border guards looked the other way. Narada Odbrana agents helped them along the route, using safe houses.
Risky business.
Definitely.
Yeah.
There was even a point where Abranovic got separated for a bit because someone thought he looked suspicious. Shows how precarious it was.
And then they get to Sarajevo. Is there that story about the train? Correct.
It seems so. A bizarre coincidence. Princip and Grabej meet up with Abranovic in Tuzla, and on the train to Sarajevo, they apparently strike up a conversation with a Sarajevo police detective who's on the same train. Yes. And during the chat, Abranovic finds out the exact date of the Archduke's visit, which they hadn't known for sure until then. He passes the info on.
Talk about an intelligence blunder. Or just sheer bad luck for the Archduke.
Incredible, isn't it? Meanwhile, Ilic is sorting out the weapons in Sarajevo, getting them hidden. His movements are a bit murky around this time, though. He made this odd trip to Brod on the border.
Why? Any idea?
Speculation is it might have been about getting final orders, maybe even a temporary cancellation from APIS that was then reversed. It adds to the mystery.
So right up to the last minute, it wasn't absolutely certain.
It seems there was some uncertainty. But on the 27th, the day before, Ilic hands out the weapons. He finally brings the Belgrade group and the Sarajevo recruits together, tells them the plan is on for tomorrow. They even send a postcard, apparently.
A postcard? To who?
To Vladimir Gacinovic, a key Black Hand federal for Bosnia who was actually in France, just confirming things were moving forward.
Wow, the eve of the attack.
Okay.
Take us through the day itself. June 28th, 1914.
Right, Sunday morning. Ilic places the 6 assassins at different points along the Apple Quay, the main road the motorcade is expected to take.
They know the route.
They know the planned route to the town hall, yes. Franz Ferdinand and Sophie arrive by train. Governor Potiorek meets them. There's a motorcade of 6 cars ready.
And security.
Was it heavy?
Shockingly light. That's a crucial failure. The local military commander had actually suggested lining the route with soldiers, but Potiorek apparently overruled him, didn't want to seem unwelcoming.
A fatal decision.
Absolutely. So security was just a handful of local police. The motorcade sets off towards the town hall.
And the assassins are waiting.
Yes. The first one, Mehmed Bashish, armed with a bomb. He freezes, doesn't act. The next one, Maso Brilovic, pistol and bomb. He also fails to act.
Nerves. Second thoughts.
Maybe. But then, the third assassin, Nedeljko Abranovic. As the Archduke's car approaches, around 10:10 a.m., he steps forward and throws his bomb.
The famous bomb attempt? But it missed, right?
It missed the Archduke's car. It apparently hit the folded-back canvas roof and bounced off. Bounced off. Where did it land?
It landed under the next car in the motorcade. The explosion was still powerful, though. Disabled that car, injured about 16 to 20 people, including one of the Archduke's aides. Chaos erupts.
And Abranovic tries to escape.
He does. Swallows a cyanide pill, jumps into the Miljacka River right there.
But the cyanide...
Didn't work properly. It was old, just made him sick. And the river was really shallow that summer, maybe only a few inches deep.
So he's just stuck there, sick, in a shallow river.
Pretty much. The police grab him quickly, and the crowd is furious. They start beating him before he's dragged away.
What about the Archduke's car?
It speeds off, away from the explosion site, towards the town hall. The other assassins further down the road, Popovich, Princip, Grabish, they're caught by surprise.
By the explosion and the car racing past.
Exactly. They don't react in time. The motorcade gets away. At this point, it looks like the assassination has failed.
They missed their chance. But the story wasn't over.
Not by a long shot. They get to the town hall. Franz Ferdinand is, understandably, furious. He apparently confronts the mayor, saying something like, "I come here for a visit, and I am greeted with bombs."
I can imagine.
Sophie manages to calm him down. He gives his planned speech, though he adds a bit about being pleased to have escaped assassination. Then he makes a decision. He insists on going to the hospital to visit the people who were injured by Abranovic's bomb. A compassionate gesture.
But one that changes everything.
Tragically, yes. Governor Potiorek agrees. They decide to change the route to the hospital, take Apple Quay again to avoid the city center.
Okay, a new route.
But crucially, in the confusion, Potiorek forgets to tell the driver of the Archduke's car about the change.
He forgets to tell the driver.
Seems unbelievable, but yes. So the driver, Leopold Luschka, starts following the original planned route, the one they were supposed to take before the bombing.
Which takes him?
Towards Franz Joseph Street. He makes a right turn off Apple Quay, near the Latin Bridge. The wrong turn.
The fatal wrong turn.
Potiorek, sitting in the car, realizes the mistake immediately. He yells at the driver, "What is this? This is the wrong way. We're supposed to go straight."
And the driver tries to correct?
He hits the brakes, tries to put the car in reverse, but the gears lock or the engine stalls. The car stops, dead still.
And where does it stop?
Almost directly in front of where Gavrilo Princip happens to be standing.
Princip. He was still there.
He'd moved after the first attempt failed. Maybe gone for a coffee, maybe just repositioned himself. But there he was, by Schiller's Delicatessen, and suddenly, his target, the Archduke's car, stalls right in front of him. Maybe 5 feet away.
Just presented to him.
An unbelievable second chance delivered by fate. Princip doesn't hesitate. He steps forward, raises his pistol in FN model 1910, and fires twice. Point-blank range.
Into the car.
Into the open car. One bullet hits Franz Ferdinand in the neck, severing his jugular vein. The other hits Sophie in the abdomen.
Oh, God. What happened then?
Sophie collapses immediately onto Franz Ferdinand. He's still conscious for a moment. Count Herak, who was in the car, reported his last words were pleas to Sophie. "Sophie, Sophie, don't die. Live for our children."
Heartbreaking.
Then he apparently murmured, "It is nothing," a few times as he lost consciousness. They rushed them to the governor's residence nearby.
But it was too late.
Far too late. Sophie was likely dead almost instantly or died upon arrival. Franz Ferdinand died just minutes later, around 11:30 that morning.
Both of them gone, just like that. And Princip. What happened to him right after the shots?
He tried to turn the gun on himself, then tried to swallow his cyanide capsule, but people in the crowd grabbed him immediately. Police arrested him on the spot.
And that myth about him eating a sandwich?
Total myth. There's zero contemporary evidence for it. It probably came from a novel written much later. The reality was fast, brutal, and chaotic. No time for sandwiches. Mid-episode announcement.
This is just such a cascade of events. If you're finding this deep dive as compelling as we are, make sure you don't miss future stories. Hit that subscribe button for Tell Me More Stories Told As podcast right now.
Yeah, definitely subscribe so you catch every deep dive. We've got plenty more history to unpack.
Okay, so the immediate aftermath. The Archduke and Duchess are dead. What happens next? The funeral.
The funeral arrangements were, well, frankly, pretty disrespectful. The official in charge, Prince Montenuovo, apparently disliked Franz Ferdinand intensely.
Because of the morganatic marriage?
Largely, yes.
Yeah.
He used protocol to minimize the ceremonies. Many foreign royals who wanted to attend were discouraged. Even their children were kept away from the main public events. It was quite shabby, a final insult reflecting Sophie's status.
Awful. And back in Sarajevo, what was the reaction on the streets?
It turned ugly fast. Anti-Serb riots broke out almost immediately in Sarajevo and then spread to other cities in Austria-Hungary. Yes, often encouraged or at least tolerated by authorities. Serb homes, shops, businesses were looted and destroyed. People were attacked. It was violent retribution.
And the assassins who were caught. The trial.
The trial was held in Sarajevo in October 1914. Princip, Abranović, Ilić, the others who were caught. It was a major event.
What was their defense? Did they take responsibility?
Some of the older ones tried to downplay their roles, maybe suggesting they were coerced. But Princip and the core group were defiant. They took full responsibility, claimed it was their idea, and tried to shield Serbia from official blame.
Did the court buy that?
Not entirely. The court concluded Serbian military circles were involved. The sentences varied. Princip, Abranović, and Grabić were under 20, so they couldn't get the death penalty under Austro-Hungarian law.
So they got prison sentences.
20 years each, the maximum. Danilo Ilić and 4 others considered adults and key plotters were sentenced to death by hanging?
Did they survive prison long, Princip and Abranović?
No. Both died in Theresienstadt prison from tuberculosis within a few years. Conditions were harsh.
Is that story true about the children forgiving Abranović?
There are reports, yes, that he received a letter of forgiveness from Franz Ferdinand and Sophie's orphan children before he died. A small, strange moment of grace in all the darkness.
But the story doesn't end there. There was another trial later, in Serbia?
Yes, the Salonika trial in 1917. This was during the war, Serbia was occupied, the government was in exile in Greece. It's a very controversial trial.
Why controversial?
Because key Black Hand members, including Apis himself, Ray Malavovic, and others, were arrested by the Serbian government in exile and put on trial for, well, trumped-up charges of treason against the Serbian Prince Regent.
So not directly for the Sarajevo assassination?
Not initially, but during this trial, under duress, Apis confessed to ordering the assassination of Franz Ferdinand.
He confessed.
He did. Whether it was entirely voluntary is debated. It might have been politically convenient for the Serbian leadership at the time, but he confessed.
And the outcome?
Apis, Malababic, and another officer, Vulovic, were found guilty and executed by firing squad. Serbia basically executed the very people who had orchestrated the plot. Mehmet Bašić, the one who didn't act initially but was part of the plot, was imprisoned.
Okay, what about this whole issue of Serbia warning Austria-Hungary beforehand? Did that happen?
It's incredibly murky. Serbia claimed they gave a warning. The Serbian ambassador in Vienna apparently told an Austro-Hungarian official something vague about knowing there were plots, maybe that some young Serbs might try something if Ferdinand went to Sarajevo.
But nothing specific. No names, no dates.
Nothing concrete at all. It was so vague it was practically useless. Was it a genuine but clumsy attempt to warn? Or was it deliberately ambiguous, a way for the Serbian Prime Minister Pasic to cover himself later? Historians still argue about it.
So we just don't know for sure.
We don't. And the role of Rade Malababic, the agent executed with Apis, is also significant. Before he was shot, he also confessed his role in organizing the operation.
Which, again, points towards Serbian intelligence involvement. So, was it a Black Hand plot or a Serbian military intelligence plot?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Apis was head of intelligence and a leader of the Black Hand. Tankosic was military and Black Hand. The lines were completely blurred. It seems likely it was driven by the Black Hand network, but using resources and connections within Serbian military intelligence. Perhaps not an official state-sanctioned act in the formal sense, but certainly facilitated by key figures within the state apparatus.
What about that newspaper clipping Abramovich mentioned as his inspiration?
Yeah, he claimed in court he got the idea from reading about the visit in a newspaper. But the timing doesn't quite add up with other evidence. It might have just been something he said, maybe to simplify things or protect others.
And Narodna Odbrana, were they really involved?
They were the older, broader nationalist group. Some members were definitely involved in helping the assassins, especially crossing the border. But the organization itself was officially more focused on culture and propaganda. It's possible the more radical Black Hand elements sort of hijacked parts of Narodna Odbrana's network for their own violent aims.
And Milan Signovic, the guy who got the weapons, he seems to have gotten off scot-free.
He did. Austria-Hungary demanded his arrest, but Serbia protected him. He even testified against Apis at Salonika and got a government job later. Very suspicious. Suggests powerful protection within Serbia.
Were other countries involved? Any truth to rumors about Russia?
Apis, in his confession, mentioned believing they had Russian backing, or at least that Russia wouldn't object. The Russian military attaché in Belgrade denied direct involvement fiercely, but his assistant later made some admissions suggesting they knew more than they let on, perhaps provided some funding indirectly to nationalist groups. It's another layer of intrigue.
So this wasn't just a Balkan issue. The ripples spread immediately.
Oh, instantly. Everyone knew this was serious, even if, initially, some commentators tried to downplay it, hoping it wouldn't escalate.
A hope that was quickly dashed.
Completely. Austria-Hungary, backed by Germany, the famous blank check, felt emboldened. They issued that ultimatum to Serbia in July.
The July ultimatum, designed to be rejected.
Pretty much. 10 demands, incredibly harsh. Allowing Austro-Hungarian officials to operate within Serbia to investigate the assassination, cracking down on all anti-Austrian activity. Stuff Serbia couldn't realistically accept completely without sacrificing its sovereignty.
How did Serbia respond?
They actually agreed to most of the demands, surprisingly. But they rejected or offered arbitration on the key point about Austro-Hungarian officials operating on Serbian soil.
And that was enough for Austria-Hungary.
It was the excuse they needed. They declared Serbia's response unsatisfactory and declared war on July 28, 1914, exactly 1 month after the assassination.
And then the dominoes fell.
Russia mobilized to support Serbia. Germany declared war on Russia and then France. Germany invaded Belgium to get to France, which brought Great Britain into the war. The alliance system just clicked into place, pulling everyone into the onus. World War I had begun.
It's staggering. Do you think if Franz Ferdinand hadn't been assassinated, if he had lived, could war have been averted?
It's impossible to say for sure, but it's a major historical what-if. His potential federalist reforms might have eased some tensions. He was also known to be cautious about war with Russia. His removal took away a voice, perhaps the most powerful voice within Austria-Hungary, that might have argued for restraint. His death definitely made it easier for the war hawks in Vienna and Berlin to push things towards conflict.
So, fast forward to today. What remains of this event in Sarajevo?
The spot near the Latin Bridge where Princip stood is marked. There's a small museum nearby. But Princip himself, his legacy is incredibly divisive, especially in Bosnia and Herzegovina. For many Bosnian Serbs, he remains a hero, a freedom fighter against oppression. There are statues of him in East Sarajevo and Belgrade. But for many Bosniaks and Croats, he's seen as a terrorist, a Serb nationalist whose actions led to immense suffering.
So the interpretation depends entirely on your perspective.
Entirely. And you see this reflected even in education. Serbian history textbooks often minimize Serbian responsibility for starting the war, framing Princip's act very differently than textbooks elsewhere.
Are there artifacts preserved?
Yes, quite a few. The Archduke's uniform, stained with blood, is in the Museum of Military History in Vienna. The actual car they were riding in is also there. And Princip's pistol, the FN Model 1910, is also preserved. Tangible links to that day.
And the story continues to be told.
Absolutely. Countless books, plays, films, TV series over the last century have tackled the assassination, each offering its own perspective on the motives, the consequences, the human drama. It clearly still fascinates us.
So, wrapping this up, what does this incredible story mean for us listening today? What's the takeaway?
I think it's a really stark reminder, isn't it? How one single event born from deep historical tensions and a tangled web of politics and nationalism can just completely change the world. It shows how fragile peace can be.
And how individual actions, choices made by people like Princip, Illich, Apis, Podirek, even the driver Lojka making that wrong turn, can have these enormous, unforeseen global consequences.
Exactly. Thinking about that chain reaction from those shots by the Latin Bridge to the trenches of the Western Front, it's almost overwhelming.
What stands out most to you from all this? What questions linger as such a complex tapestry?
Ambition, nationalism, violence, chance, it's all woven together. It really makes you think about the forces that drive history and how easily things can spiral out of control.
If you want to explore this further, definitely look into biographies of the key players or the wider context of Europe just before the war. It's a endlessly fascinating period.
It really is.
Well, thank you for joining us on Tell Me More Stories Told Us podcast for this deep dive into a day that truly shook the world. We hope it shed some light on this pivotal moment.
Until next time, keep asking questions.
And never stop learning.